Hi, welcome back to my studio. I'm Gina, and I have found these amazing lanterns, and when I first saw them, I thought, what could I create inside of these? And so this first little one, I'm going to create a little garden scene. I've seen a couple of inspirational pieces, which I'm pretty excited about. It's a lovely little one that I can actually take to club days. So I'm not too sure if I'm going to be doing too much on this channel with this one, but I'll definitely be checking in and seeing on the progress. It does open from the top, but I'm going to make that one work. So let me just put that one aside for a moment. For this larger one, I have got an idea, and I just wanted to share it with you. My idea is to create the ballroom from the Labyrinth. I really wanted to find a project that I could create some pretty interesting characters. In here I've already got my little steampunk lady, just to give me an idea of scale, and she's 1/12 scale. I was really happy with how she's turned out, and I thought I probably can create something quite magical in this box. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the floor, and I want to create some varying layers, as if it's got stairs and as if it's got a floating walkway. The one thing I really love about this scene is that there's a real juxtaposition from the creatures and the masks, which have all beaks and feathers and all sorts of things and bones and sort of very kind of macabre, intermixed with this lovely grandeur of the ballroom. So let's get started. To begin with, I needed to create a pattern for the floor. So what I've done is I've actually cut out a square roughly around the same size as the base of the lantern, and I'm just cutting it to size because it's not exactly square. And then I'm going to create a bit of a pattern of where I would like the stairs and the platforms and the walkways to go. And then using a piece of foam board, so just 5mm foam board, I'm just using a small ball stylus just to put a little slight indentation into the top of the foam board. And then I'm going to go over that with a pencil. And then once I've got that marked out, I can go ahead and start cutting out the different shapes. So I've got the main shapes cut out, but one thing I've also realized is that if I used 5mm foam board for all of the different levels, it was going to be quite thick, and I wanted to maximize the height inside the lantern as much as possible. So I'm going to use mat board actually as a sort of that in between. So the mat board that I'm using is only 1mm thick, but for any of those stairs where it's sort of either going up or down, and it's just really to highlight the fact that there are stairs there, I'm going to use the mat board. Some places I double up the mat board because it just looks better that way, but for the most part it's really just to give the illusion that there is some height difference between all the different areas. So I'm just going to work my way around and cut out some of the stairs and just sort of start placing those into place. So these pieces here are two pieces of mat board put together, whereas these ones are one piece of mat board put together. So it just depends on the look that I'm going for, and then I'm just going to start gluing them all together and layering it all up. As the layers start to take shape, in some areas I'm going to need to create some double layers of foam board just to give some height. And here you can see the difference between the foam board and the mat board stairs. And the central piece is actually going to be 3 layers high, just so that I can get that, again, just that height difference between them all. Got our supervisor on duty. And so here you can see up the back, I'm just trying to work out how high I want that piece to be, because that's going to be the highest piece, and then the opposite corner is the lowest piece, and then it just sort of goes in different heights. I'll get all of this glued into place and we'll have a look at how that kind of has all come together. So even with my best efforts, all the pieces don't necessarily line up really lovely and beautifully together, and even the layers of mat board are ever so slightly different. So what I'm going to do is use some filler, and I'm going to go around and fill in any of those gaps where the 2 pieces of foam board have come together, as well as where the layers have come together. So I'm actually going to be covering this with paper, but in order to do that, I want to make sure that it's got a nice smooth, or as smooth as possible, surface, because the paper will actually mold itself to any of the differences in layers in the mat board and foam board. So I just want to make sure that I have a nice smooth surface for the paper to stick onto. So once that's had a really light sand, I go through and cover all of those edges with paper, which I haven't got a video of, but here you can see all the different layers coming together, and I'm pretty happy with how that's turned out. Still reasonably flat, which is great, because then I can maximize the height inside of the lantern. And now I'm going to move on to painting. So I'm just using this base coat. It's a nice warm undertone, sort of almost a flesh color, which is great. And I'm wanting to create quite of a white stone effect. So once this has gone on, I'm going to go over and start using a sponge, which I've used sort of the similar technique in the past. So a sponge effect using different layers of yellow and blue to begin with, to kind of mix up the undertones of the stone, and then I'm going to add layers of grey and white all the way up until I've got quite happy with the final finish. So all of the layers underneath here are quite subtle, but what it does is add some depth to the white, which would normally just be completely flat. So moving on to creating the clock. So it's one of the iconic pieces in the scene. And I'm using a double layer of matte board, and I've just traced out or drawn out this shape based on the little clock that is the reference. And then I'm just going to cut out this shape, and it's going to be the base. So it's 2 layers of matte board, it's about 10 millimeters thick. I didn't have the blade quite straight up and down, so the back of it looks a little bit wonky, but I'm not too worried about that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it with hot glue. So I'm using the silicone molds, as you can see in the background there, and I've just done whole lots of different shapes and glued them into place. I don't know what happened to the video, apologies, but don't worry, because I'm going to do another version of it as well. So it looks a little bit messy when the hot glue is just in place, but as I go through and start painting it, it really does start to come together. And there you can kind of see the little inspiration clock, which is 1/12 scale, so it is the scale of this project, but I wanted to create the clock out of scale. I wanted it to be big, I wanted it to be seen, I wanted it to be visible, because it is quite a central piece in the movie. And I just put a base coat of yellow underneath, and then I'm just going over with some gold, and then I'm going to put a wash over it to try and highlight, or low light actually, put in all the nooks and crannies, which is a mixture of brown and copper. So I just wanted to kind of bring through those dimensions of gold, and I'm just going to work my way around through that. And then once that's done, I'm going to put a coat or a dry brush of a mixture of silver and gold over the top, because I really wanted to give it a really light highlight over the top. And then I actually do go back over with just plain gold to try and highlight some of those areas as well. So I'm really pleased with how this is looking. It looks a lot better now than what it did with just the glue. And then I've just found this little clock face, which I've printed off on some photo paper. And what I've realized is that the clock face, or the way that I've created the clock, this is as big as clock face as I can get into the space. And it's really quite tiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redo it. Just over the top, I'm using some Dimensional Magic, which was introduced to me by Shira at Queen City Minis. Thank you, Shira. And it dries really lovely, shiny, almost like resin, but it's actually a glue. It's made by Mod Podge. Moving on to the second clock, I'm actually going to do this one slightly differently. I'm actually going to use a bottle cap and a bit of foam, which you can sort of see in the middle there, and then I'm just going to use the hot glue into the silicone molds. So I didn't show this process or this step in the previous clock build, but I thought I'd show you in this one here. So this particular clock, I'm just using hot glue and the bottle cap, and I'm going to use all sorts of different shapes and sizes to work my way around creating the outside of the clock, and then also I want to create some legs as well. So this one has a much bigger clock face, so you can see there it is almost twice the size as the previous one. And the significant piece around the clock actually has 13 numbers on the dial instead of 12. So I really wanted to make sure that that is seen. And so the bigger the clock face, the more likely you're going to be able to see all of those details. I'm going to continue working my way around, adding all of these pieces into the clock build, and then adding some additional supports, because hot glue isn't exactly the strongest material to be building out of. For the paint job, I'm actually going to be following pretty much the same steps as the previous clock. The only difference is that I'm not going to be putting the wash over it, and then once the clock face goes into place, I'll be able to show you what that final result looks like at the end. So there we go, I've got the flooring all finished. It has still got a long way to go, and I've got some really cool projects coming up for this particular build, especially around the characters. It's certainly something that I haven't lent into before, and I'm really excited to create all the masks and all of the other details as well. So if you've come this far and you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. This is going to be a pretty fun project, so if you want to keep up to date, turn on that bell notification as well. So if you've liked this video, consider hitting that like button. Let's have a look at the final result. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye for now.